The most powerful business empire in modern Asian history wasn't built on a business plan. It was built on a crime. It is 1932. Chung Ju-yung is 16 years old, standing alone in a barn on a rainy night. With his hand on the wooden latch, he pulls it back, then puts it on again. He knows exactly what this means. If he takes that animal, his parents and 7 brothers and sisters have nothing to eat that winter. He takes it anyway. He walks miles through the rain, sells the cow for 71, and gets on a train to Seoul. With his hand pressed over his pocket the entire ride, feeling the weight of that money, he thought it would buy his freedom. He had no idea the guilt would follow him for the rest of his life. That kid grew up to build Hyundai, a company worth over $200 billion that once made up a fifth of South Korea's entire economy. And the story of how he did it is one of the most remarkable comebacks in business history, because this wasn't just a hard work story. It was getting knocked down, burned out, and stripped of everything over and over again, and somehow refusing to quit every single time. To understand how he pulled it off, we need to go back to where it all started. It is 1929. Chung is growing up in a tiny village called Asan, and life there is basically just dirt and hard labor. Korea had been under Japanese occupation for almost 20 years at this point, and the landlord was taking 70% of every harvest. You worked all year and kept almost nothing. Chung wanted to be a school teacher, but he was the oldest of 8 kids. So he dropped out at 14 and went to work in the fields, planting rice by hand from dawn to dusk. In winter, he'd strap heavy bundles of firewood to his back and walk from town to town, selling them for a few copper coins. That was his life. So he ran. He made it to a city called Kawan, found work hauling stones on a construction site, and earned his first real paycheck. 2 months later, his father showed up, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him back to the farm. He ran again, this time all the way to Seoul. His father tracked him down a second time, stood in front of him, and said, "You're a farm boy with a 6th grade education. Seoul is packed with unemployed college graduates. A nobody like you won't survive here." Then he marched his son back to the farm again. That autumn, the harvest failed. There was no food stored for winter, and that is when Chung made the decision that would define the rest of his life. He walked back into that barn one rainy night, took the cow, sold it, and got on a train to Seoul. The next morning at 4 a.m., his father walked into the barn with a bucket of feed. The stall was empty. The rope was lying in the mud. The old man dropped the bucket. It shattered on the ground. He didn't collapse or yell. He just walked over to the wooden post, sat down in the mud where the cow used to sleep, and stared at that rope for 12 hours without saying a single word. Meanwhile, miles away, Chung stepped off the train and found work at a starch syrup factory sweeping floors. 3 won a day, no blanket. He slept on concrete, and at night, rats would run across his legs. He didn't chase them. He just pulled his knees to his chest and waited for morning. When his hands froze from sweeping wet floors, he dipped them into buckets of warm syrup waste. It burned his cracked skin. He kept sweeping. Eventually, in 1934, he landed a job at a rice store, where the owner, a man named Bok-hung, took a chance on the skinny kid with no references. Chung delivered rice by bicycle before dawn every morning. Never late. Never short-changed a customer, never asked to leave early. 6 months in, the owner made him accountant. 2 years after that, the owner got sick, called Chung into the back office, put a key on the table, and said, "Take it. I trust you more than anyone." Chung was 22 years old, had a 6th grade education, no family money, and a stranger had just handed him everything he'd built. That key wasn't just a store. He told Chung something his own father never had, that someone believed he was worth betting on. He never forgot that feeling. But in 1939, The Japanese colonial government introduced a rice rationing system and started diverting food supplies to their military. Chung's store was forced to close. He packed up and went home. When he walked through the door, his father looked at him and then looked away. That same silence. Chung stood there, staring at the same fields he'd spent his whole life trying to escape, and made himself a promise. He was not going to die in this dirt. He still had his savings. And one question kept turning over in his mind. What kind of business hadn't the Japanese gotten their hands on yet? The answer was cars. So in 1940, Chung took out a bank loan, bought an auto repair shop in Seoul, and called it the Ado Service Garage. Here is the thing, though. He knew absolutely nothing about cars. He hired a mechanic, set his prices lower than every competitor in the city, and just treated customers well. A few months later, the whole place burned to the ground. Tools melted. Customers' cars reduced to blackened frames. Most people would have called it quits. Chung took out a second loan, moved to a busier part of the city, and rebuilt from scratch. 2 years later, he had 70 employees. Then, in 1942, the Japanese government seized the garage for the war effort. Just like that, gone again, Chung packed up his savings, 50,000 won, and went home to wait. When the war ended and Korea gained independence, Chung wasted no time. In 1946, he opened a new repair center and named it Hyundai, which just means modern. His team fixed old Japanese cars and US military trucks, and by the end of the year, he had 80 people working for him. But then he noticed something that changed everything. His invoices for auto repairs totaled about 400,000 won for the year. Meanwhile, he watched a construction company sign a single contract worth 10 million won. Fixing machines was keeping him small. Building things was where the real money was. So, in 1947, he founded Hyundai Construction. The only problem, he'd never read a blueprint in his life. In 1949, Chung sat in a small shed, trying to figure out how to bid on his first construction contract. He didn't even know how to estimate how much concrete he'd need. He called a Japanese engineer he'd met years earlier for help. The guy laughed and hung up. So Chung physically walked to the engineer's office in Busan and stood outside the door for a full hour until the man let him in. Then he paid the engineer his entire month's savings just to learn how to read one structural drawing. That is the kind of person we're dealing with here. In 1950, the Korean War broke out, and Chung evacuated to Busan with basically nothing. Most people were just waiting for the fighting to stop. Chung was out looking for opportunities, and he found one, a help wanted notice, nailed to the gate of a US Army base. While everyone else was running away from the front lines, he walked toward them. He signed contracts to build military barracks, canteens, and officers' quarters, working in construction zones where you could still hear shells going off in the distance. He didn't wait for things to calm down. He just started building. In 1953, the US government started pouring money into rebuilding South Korea, and Chung won the contract to restore the Goryeo Bridge. No heavy equipment, no safety gear. Workers died on the site. Inflation ate through his fixed payment, and he ran out of money. His brothers actually sold their own houses just to keep paying the workers. Competitors openly mocked him for only having a 6th grade education, but Chung didn't stop. He finished the bridge, took a loss on the whole project, but earned the highest credit rating the South Korean government gave out. And while other private businesses couldn't import foreign machinery, Chung used his US Army connections to buy their heavy equipment directly. Bulldozers, cranes, everything his competitors couldn't get anywhere. Now, one thing about this era that is easy to overlook: Chung wasn't doing this entirely on his own. The South Korean government was deliberately backing a small group of family-run companies with subsidies, loan guarantees, and protected markets. Hyundai was one of them, and that absolutely helped. But here is the thing. Plenty of companies got that same treatment and still disappeared. The difference was the guy who kept building even when the bridge was bleeding him dry through the late 1950s and into the 1960s. Hyundai construction just kept growing. Roads, dams, buildings all across South Korea. But Chung had never forgotten about cars. He'd built that business twice and lost it both times. He wanted back in, this time on his own terms. In 1967, Chung founded Hyundai Motor Company. He signed a licensing deal with Ford, built the Ulsan assembly plant in under 6 months, and started rolling out his first car, the Hyundai Cortina. He assumed that if you could build it at scale, success would follow automatically. It didn't. South Korea's roads were mostly unpaved dirt tracks, and the Cortina broke down constantly. Customers were demanding refunds. Then, in September 1969, a flood hit Ulsan. 4 feet of rainwater submerged the factory floor, and fully assembled Cortinas were literally floating across the production line. Rumors started spreading that Hyundai was selling waterlogged cars. After the flood, Chung walked through the ruined plant. Water was still dripping from the ceiling. Workers were standing around in soaking wet uniforms, staring at the mud-caked assembly line. Chung took off his shoes, stepped into the water, picked up a wrench, and without saying a word, started cleaning the conveyor belt with a rag. One by one, the workers joined him. 2 days straight. No beds, no hot food, just rags and buckets. But there was a bigger problem. Ford was refusing to let Chung sell the Cortina outside of Korea. Their executives made it pretty clear. As far as they were concerned, Hyundai was just a cheap labor subcontractor. And that was it. In 1974, Chung terminated the deal. He was going to build his own car, on his own terms. The catch was, he had no car, no technology, and no money, and he needed all three, fast. So in 1976, he decided to build a shipyard. Not just any shipyard, a massive supertanker yard. There was one fairly significant problem with this plan. South Korea had never built a modern ship, and Chung had no money. He flew to London, walked into the headquarters of Barclays Bank, and asked for a $50 million loan. The executives laughed at him. They saw a guy in a cheap suit from a country that had never built a ship. They told him to leave. Chung didn't yell, didn't beg. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out a 501 banknote, and slapped it down on the table. He pointed to the picture on it, a 16th century Korean ironclad warship called the Turtle Ship, built in 1592. Then he looked at the bankers and said, "We were building iron ships 300 years before your country even started." The room went quiet. He got the loan. With that loan, he built the Ulsan shipyard, hiring European engineers since he had no expertise, buying designs from a Scottish shipbuilder since he had no experience. He partnered with Mitsubishi for the engines and brought in European designers to style the body of his first original car. The result was the Hyundai Pony, designed for rough roads, priced at $5,900. It grabbed 40% of the Korean market and became a bestseller in Canada. At the same time, Chung was bidding on the Jubail Industrial Harbor in Saudi Arabia, one of the largest construction projects in the world at the time. No transport ships. He just built the steel structures in Korea, loaded them onto barges, and towed them across the ocean to the Middle East. In 1985, he pushed into the US market with the Hyundai Excel, $4,995, roughly half the price of the average American car. He sold 168,000 units in the first year, 1 million more worldwide. It looked like everything was finally coming together. But the cracks were already forming underneath. Within 2 years, the complaints started flooding in. Transmissions were failing, paint was peeling, engines were stalling on highways. Americans started making jokes about the brand name. Hope you understand nothing's drivable and inexpensive. Sales collapsed. And just like that, the empire Chung had spent decades building was facing its first real threat of falling apart. Chung sat alone in his office. US sales reports spread out in front of him, red numbers across every single column. He didn't call his engineers, didn't talk to his sons. He just sat there staring at the page for 2 hours, not moving. But then he made a decision. He took what capital he had left and poured it all into building Hyundai's own engines and transmissions from scratch. No more shortcuts. In 1998, he acquired Kia Motors to pull resources together. And then he did something that honestly nobody saw coming. He flew to Los Angeles, walked into a Hyundai dealership on his own, no suit, no entourage, and asked to speak with a customer who'd had problems with their car. The salesman refused. Chung sat in the showroom for 3 hours. Eventually, a customer came in complaining about a broken transmission, and Chung followed him outside to the parking lot, got down on his knees next to the car, and asked the man to show him exactly what was wrong. Then he walked to a payphone and called an engineer in Seoul, told him to get on a plane to Ella first thing in the morning, and to send a message that Hyundai had genuinely changed. He announced a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty on every Hyundai sold in the US. The whole industry thought he'd lost his mind. By 2004, Hyundai had climbed to second place in initial quality ratings, behind only Toyota, which is genuinely one of the most remarkable turnarounds in automotive history. In 1998, 66 years after he pulled that wooden latch, an 83-year-old Chung Ju-yung walked to the border of North Korea and brought 1,001 cows with him. He marched them across the demilitarized zone, back toward the village he'd run from as a teenager. He said it was to repay his father. And standing there, watching that herd cross into the north, you have to wonder, did 1,000 cows actually settle that debt? Or was the man who built a $200 billion empire still, somewhere deep down, just a 16-year-old kid standing in the rain, trying to fill an empty barn? Chung Ju-yung stole a cow to escape the dirt and ended up building a $200 billion empire. But what if I told you another legendary Asian carmaker started with even less? The rebellious true story of Soichiro Honda is right here. Click to watch now.